Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. Stephen Westbrook leaned back in his armchair, situated in the formal living room. Across from him, a couch sat vacant, separated by a coffee table adorned with 3 champagne flutes, 1 filled, 2 empty, and an ice bucket cradling a champagne bottle. The clock read 8:20 p.m. Despite his serene demeanor, an observer, had there been one, might have found his calm unsettling as he spoke aloud to no one in particular. I hear her car pulling into the driveway. The house was silent, and Stephen remained alone. He stayed seated, poised, as the sound of the front door opening reached his ears. Though the door was out of sight, his wife's voice carried clearly. "Stephen? Where are you?" "In the formal lounge, Viviana," he called back, rising as she stepped through the archway. Her hand gripped that of a man who looked a few years her junior. At 48, Viviana carried herself with a mix of tension and poise. The man beside her, clad in a business suit, was slim and of average height. In her other hand, she clutched a bright orange envelope. "Stephen, this is Anthony. Anthony, my husband, Stephen." Her voice faltered, her gaze skirting Stephen's. He stepped forward with a measured calm, extending his hand toward the newcomer. "A pleasure to meet you, Anthony. May I call you by your first name?" "Of course, sir," Anthony replied politely. "Please, just Stephen will do." His tone was even, almost cordial. "Can I get you a glass of champagne? Have a seat, both of you." Viviana and Anthony hesitated, but eventually sank into the couch. Stephen poured the champagne, handing each of them a glass before raising his own. "Cheers. Now, would one of you care to explain why we're here?" The couple exchanged a fleeting glance. Anthony squeezed Viviana's hand reassuringly before she turned toward Stephen, her voice unsteady. "Stephen, there's no easy way to say this, so I'll be direct. Anthony and we're in love. I want a divorce so we can get married." Her words hung in the air as she braced for the explosion she was certain would follow. When it didn't come, she looked up tentatively, only to find her husband's face composed, unreadable. The silence pressed on her, and she instinctively shifted closer to Anthony. Stephen's voice broke the tension, calm and even. "Are those the divorce papers?" Viviana blinked, caught off guard. This wasn't the reaction she had anticipated. She glanced at Anthony, seeking support. He retrieved the envelope and set it on the table. "Yes," Anthony said. "These are the papers. I've ensured they're fair. Viviana is only asking to keep her car. She's signed over her share of the house, your car, and all joint assets, including your retirement funds. Everything is notarized, but feel free to have your lawyer review them." Stephen nodded. How considerate. Viviana remained uneasy, visibly prepared for a storm that hadn't arrived. Sensing her discomfort, Anthony added, "It was my suggestion, Stephen. I didn't want to take anything from you. Taking your wife was already enough." Viviana spoke softly, her voice halting. "Anthony is well off. We'll be fine without your money. This isn't about that." Stephen's tone turned slightly wry. "Perhaps if you'd found a job after the kids grew up, things might have been different, Viviana." She averted her gaze, saying nothing. Stephen returned his attention to Anthony. "And you? Will you be having a similar conversation with your wife, or has that been handled?" Anthony's voice dropped. "My wife passed away 8 years ago. I'm a widower." "I'm sorry for your loss," Stephen said sincerely. "Thank you. It was difficult, but time has a way of healing. I never expected to find someone like Viviana, but when I did, it felt right. I regret the situation, but I couldn't turn away from what we've found." Stephen nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate your candor. You have my blessing." Viviana exhaled audibly, relief washing over her. She had dreaded a confrontation, and her husband's composed reaction was wholly unexpected. "So," Stephen continued, "you met Anthony during one of your girls' nights out, I take it?" Viviana nodded reluctantly. "One of those nights I specifically questioned, and you assured me were nothing to worry about?" Her voice was faint. "Yes." Stephen smirked faintly. "There's a lesson in that for you, Anthony." Anthony glanced at Viviana, who now seemed captivated by the floor. "So, you're leaving me the house, Stephen said. I assume you'll be moving into Anthony's place? Yes, Viviana murmured. I planned to pack tomorrow while you were at work. Stephen's tone sharpened. By tomorrow, the locks will be changed. A precaution, as I'm sure your lawyer would agree. But why wait? You can start now. Viviana hesitated, then rose. Anthony moved to follow, but Stephen stopped him. Why don't you stay? We should talk. Viviana can begin packing. Torn, Viviana lingered until Anthony sat back down. Reassured, she left the room. Stephen turned to Anthony. You know, he began, it's been a while since Viviana showed me much affection. I imagine that's around the time you two met. This separation might be a relief. Anthony appeared startled. That's very gracious of you. Clinging to a loveless marriage has never made sense to me. But tell me, Anthony, do you truly understand what you're stepping into? As a lawyer, you undoubtedly understand that selling a car or a house comes with a legal obligation to disclose any known defects to the buyer. Anthony smirked at the analogy. Slavery's long gone, Stephen, so I doubt Viviana would appreciate being compared to property requiring full disclosure. But I see what you're getting at, he replied. Stephen returned the smile, feeling validated in his belief that Anthony was both perceptive and sensible. All right. I need you to know up front that what I'm about to share isn't coming from a place of bitterness. My goal is simply to be transparent about certain things regarding Viviana, things you might not have noticed yet. Believe it or not, I still care about her happiness, even after spending 27 years in love with her. Stephen paused briefly to assess Anthony's reaction. I also want to tell you about the efforts I made to make her happy, even though I failed. Maybe hearing this will help you avoid the mistakes I made. Anthony listened quietly, picking up on the personal nature of the conversation and feeling an unspoken obligation to hear Stephen out, despite sensing some self-interest behind his words. Has Viviana started taking the pill again? Stephen asked abruptly. Anthony shifted in his seat, the directness of the question catching him off guard. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, she's back on it now, he admitted, uneasy about what might follow. Stephen pressed on, unbothered by Anthony's discomfort. When we first met, she was on it too. But after we got married, she stopped taking it within the first year. She claimed it killed her desire for intimacy. From that point on, I had to take responsibility for protection, and I hated it. Condoms ruin spontaneity, you know? And I'll be honest, they made it harder for me to enjoy the moment. You get what I mean? Anthony nodded slowly, feeling awkward but understanding the sentiment. Yeah, I get it. Stephen exhaled deeply. When we decided to stop at 2 kids, she used the potential failure rates of other birth control methods as an excuse to avoid intimacy altogether. I begged her to reconsider the pill, but she refused, saying she didn't want to take artificial chemicals daily. After that, our physical relationship declined, from several times a week to just a couple of times a month, and then, nothing. About a year ago, I stopped asking entirely. Anthony remained silent, reflecting on Viviana's attention to natural living. Her commitment to avoiding chemicals extended even to her diet, but their physical relationship still felt passionate, even if time was limited. Stephen continued without pause. Let me ask you something, Anthony. I know this isn't exactly polite, but does she, swallow? The bluntness of the question struck Anthony like a blow. He averted his gaze, unable to hide his discomfort. I see, Stephen said quietly. She used to, back when we were dating, but that ended after the wedding. Same with her openness to certain positions, like doggy style. It stopped not long after we tied the knot. Leaning back in his chair, Stephen's tone turned reflective. I didn't even notice how much things had deteriorated until recently. I'd gotten so accustomed to rejection that I stopped trying. If I can give you any advice, it's this. Pay attention to sudden changes in her behavior. Check in with her every now and then. Anthony kept his thoughts private, allowing Stephen to continue. You know what else I failed to notice? Not long after we got married, I looked around and realized that nearly everything I owned before her was gone. My bed, my clothes, even my old photos, though I found some stashed in the attic. I'm not sure if that's just a Viviana thing or something all women do, but it felt like she was erasing my past. Anthony thought about his own situation. He'd just purchased a new bed and linens, and Viviana had recently expressed discomfort over a portrait of his late wife, whom he'd loved deeply before losing her. Stephen sighed again, the weight of his memories heavy in his voice. Just 3 weeks ago, I asked her if she still loved me, if we were okay. She looked me in the eye, as sincere as ever, and said yes. Then 3 weeks later, it was over. Amazing how fast love can vanish, isn't it? Anthony felt a growing unease as the conversation progressed. Stephen's words carried a warning he couldn't quite decipher, so he responded cautiously. Stephen, I'm a lawyer. I've spent 2 decades learning to read people and detect lies. If there's anything like that going on, I'll catch it. Stephen nodded as though reassured. Good. Then here's a tip. Watch how she treats her wedding rings. If she's like she was with me, she might start leaving them behind when she goes to visit her sister. I found mine hidden in her underwear drawer. And those girls' nights, don't take them at face value. I thought she was incapable of deceit, but I was just a fool. Getting up, Stephen retrieved a photo album and opened it. Oh, and one more thing. Don't be surprised if, in 6 months to a year, she stops going to the gym and gains some weight. Here, take a look. Anthony glanced at photos of Viviana from a few years back, noticing the difference. She looked heavier and wore far less makeup than usual. As he flipped through, one photo caught his eye. Is this her mother? He asked, noting the resemblance. Yes, Stephen said. She was stunning in her youth, but menopause changes things. Viviana's 48 now, isn't she? Keep that in mind. Stephen poured another glass of champagne, his tone softening. One last piece of advice. If she insists on a lavish wedding, be careful. I argued for a simpler ceremony so we could save for a house, but she guilted me into it, saying if I truly believed in us, I wouldn't hesitate to give her the wedding of her dreams. It didn't guarantee loyalty, though. Don't fall into the same trap. Finishing his glass, Stephen leaned back. That's all I've got. Maybe you'll succeed where I failed. If she ends up battling glandular fever again, don't waste your energy caring for her for 2 months. It didn't do me any good. The same applies to the loan I took out 2 years ago, so she could afford the breast implants and tummy tuck she insisted on. Looking back, it's likely the root of our current predicament. I refused to pay for the facelift she recently demanded, choosing instead to allocate the funds toward our retirement savings. When Viviana fixates on something, she's relentless. You've probably noticed that about her. Anthony gave a slight nod, though he was beginning to doubt whether Viviana's persistence was as admirable as he'd once believed. At the time, I thought I was being shrewd by establishing a monthly grievance night where we could openly discuss any complaints, no matter how trivial. Our most recent session was less than a month ago, yet she didn't raise a single concern. I'm sure a man with your sharp mind could devise a more effective approach. Anthony caught the glint in Stephen's eyes and suddenly understood his underlying intent. Nevertheless, Stephen had made some valid points. The notion of Viviana being entirely devoid of deceit resonated with Anthony's own suspicions. He tried to suppress the unease bubbling within him, but Stephen's smirk only intensified it. As their conversation unfolded, it became increasingly obvious that Viviana was lingering on the staircase within earshot, feigning ignorance while clearly eavesdropping. Watch for signs of her setting aside items she intends to take, Stephen advised. If she's already selecting things, it's a clear indication she's treating the marriage as over and preparing for her next conquest. It won't change what's coming, but it'll give you time to brace yourself and gather more evidence. Anthony's eyes darted around the room, finally registering the 3 champagne glasses and the ice bucket. Undeniable proof that all 3 of them were aware of the meeting beforehand, despite it ostensibly being a private discussion between 2. In his haste upon arriving, Anthony had missed these clues. Stephen watched as Anthony's sharp gaze connected the dots. Yes, I knew it was tonight. Viviana called me twice today to confirm I'd be home by 7. Anthony turned toward the staircase, where Viviana was descending once again, pretending not to have overheard. Stephen, should we go over which family photos I can take now, or leave it for later? She asked nonchalantly. Stephen ignored her, leaning back on the couch and locking eyes with Anthony. If I've made one major misstep, it was forgiving Viviana the first time I caught her cheating. What? Anthony blurted, stunned. Viviana, retreating quickly toward the kitchen, exclaimed, That's not true! Oh, but it is, Stephen responded evenly. It happened right after our second child was born. I let it go because both she and the counselor convinced me it was a one-time mistake brought on by postpartum depression. Sometimes I wonder if I was too forgiving. Maybe standing my ground would have stopped her from doing it again. I told myself I was acting in the children's best interests. They turned out fine, so maybe it was the right decision. But for her sake, I hope you'll be kind enough to forgive her when it's your turn. I'm not sure how to respond, Anthony stammered. There's no need, Stephen replied. Just answer this. If your late wife had been unfaithful in your own home, would you have forgiven her? For the first time that evening, Anthony lost his composure, leaning forward aggressively. Stephen caught a movement from the corner of his eye and glanced at Viviana, who stood frozen and pale in the kitchen doorway. My wife would never have dishonored me that way. We loved each other deeply, Anthony snapped. Wait, he added. You mentioned the first time Viviana cheated. Were there others? Stephen nodded. Yes, just that time, and now. Viviana burst into the room. I've packed, Anthony. Grab my bags and let's go now, she begged. Quiet, Anthony commanded, his voice low but firm. Viviana froze mid-step as Anthony turned back to Stephen. She told me you had an open marriage, Anthony said. Did she look you in the eye when she said that? Stephen asked. Anthony's gaze flickered between Stephen and Viviana, realization dawning. What did she tell you about your relationship? Stephen continued. She said it had been struggling for years, that counseling wasn't helping, and that neither of you saw a way forward, Anthony replied. He hesitated, frowning. But that doesn't match what you've said about your date nights and asking if she still loved you. Stephen remained silent, watching as Anthony's expression darkened. The truth was clear. He'd been deceived. He turned to Viviana, his voice laced with fury. You lying woman! You've made me into someone I despise, a man who sneaks around with another man's wife. Viviana crumpled to her knees, burying her face in her hands. When the silence stretched, she looked up, meeting the accusing stares of all present. Abruptly, she bolted out the door. No one moved to stop her. Stephen's son, John, picked up an envelope from the table, flipping through its contents without emotion. Everything looks in order, Dad, he said calmly. Good. Now, who wants a beer? Stephen asked. Anthony stood. I think I should go. No, stay, Stephen said firmly. There's still unfinished business. Like what? Anthony asked warily. Well, I can forgive you for believing her lies about an open marriage, but I haven't decided if I'll let you off for trying to take her from me. Anthony assessed the man standing before him, noting his towering height and robust frame, a clear testament to a life shaped by rigorous physical work. His attention shifted to the man's eyes, where he detected that now familiar glint. A wave of regret rippled through him as he realized he should have brought reinforcements. A little extra muscle could have driven home the message that Anthony's earlier gullibility wouldn't be repeated. Instead, he found himself feeling unanchored, uncertain of his footing in this encounter. Picking up on Anthony's discomfort, Stephen interjected to smooth things over. John here works in the same legal field as you do, Anthony. Anthony wasn't remotely shocked by Stephen's apparent knack for knowing the finer details about him. Then, a thought struck Anthony. How's the job treating you these days, John? He asked, adopting a casual tone. Lousy hours and even worse pay, John replied bluntly. Anthony saw an opening. How about teaming up with me? Count me in, John said without a moment's hesitation. Stephen laughed at their quick exchange. There's just one matter left to address, he added, his tone laced with amusement. My ex-wife's expenses. She's flat broke and without a place to stay, thanks to your stellar courtroom performance. A sense of relief started to trickle through Anthony as he caught the lighter direction the conversation was taking. Apologies, Stephen, he said, matching the playful vibe. When she lied to me, she voided the implicit agreement we had, Anthony explained. And when there's a breach of contract, ownership reverts to the original party. That's the rule. Legally, maybe, but what about ethics? Stephen challenged. Anthony smirked, dismissing the question with a wave. Come on, don't talk ethics with a lawyer. That's not exactly our forte. Hey, John, got a dictionary handy? I might need a refresher on what ethics even means. Laughter rippled through the group, but Stephen's demeanor grew more serious. No, really, Anthony. I think you owe me this much. Help her get back on track. If you play it right, you might even convince her you're open to something more permanent and enjoy a few perks along the way. Anthony cringed at the suggestion. Not a chance. That's a boundary I'm not willing to cross. but I'll check in on her, for your sake, not hers. Honestly, Stephen, I have to hand it to you. You've completely outmaneuvered me tonight. The way you kept flipping negatives into positives was impressive. Have you ever considered a career in law? You'd make a phenomenal prosecutor. Stephen's understated smile gave nothing away. He loved his work and the team he'd built, and he wasn't about to trade it for anything. All right then, Anthony said, signaling a shift to lighter topics. That's 4 beers, isn't it? For the first time that evening, Stephen broke eye contact. He turned away briefly to compose himself, ensuring no one could see the glimmer of unshed tears before he faced them again. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the night, Viviana Westbrook was sprinting as fast as she could, putting distance between herself and the smoldering ruins of the bridges she had so decisively destroyed. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.